Broncos country, what is going on, man? We got a week 1 preview. It is finally here, man. The football season is upon us. Tomorrow is the official kickoff for the season with the Chiefs and the Ravens. And then Friday we got a game in Brazil, actually. And then obviously we got a full slate of games on Sunday and then a couple Monday nights. So super pumped up, guys. Let's get into it and let's break down this matchup between the Broncos and the Seahawks. Give a little bit of background. What are some key matchups? What are some keys for victory for the Broncos? And ultimately, at the end, I'll give you guys my scoring prediction. Before I do that, guys, if you love NFL news, if you love NBA news, NHL, anything sports related, and you're a big fantasy football junkie, check some of the other videos out that I got. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. It'll really, really, really help me out. It'll help out the channel, and I appreciate it. Let's get into it, guys. All right, Broncos are opening up their 2024 NFL season on the road in Seattle. Obviously, it's a pretty dang tough opening day that we got. Right, it's tough for a lot of different reasons, not just being on the road, which is rough. But when you're doing it with a rookie quarterback and you're doing it against a team that has a completely new coaching staff and really a lot of unknowns around them, I think it makes it a little bit more tricky. And that's why I'm so fascinated about this game. And am I worried about it? Absolutely. Absolutely I am. But there's a lot of things that you want to see as a Broncos fan. Um, because this year, let's not forget about it, guys. It's always about winning, right? But winning is not going to be the ultimate number one most important thing this year. The most important thing this year is that you see growth. You see a team that gets better as the season goes on. You see a quarterback that continues to get better and better in Bo Nix as the season goes on, and that'll set us up wonderfully for the years to come. So it's always remember to keep that into context. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to go out there and win. And I'm fascinated, man. I'm really excited about this game. So let's start with a little bit of background, right? Background on the Seahawks specifically. The Seahawks are kind of an unknown team. I feel like a lot of the teams in the NFL, the national media kind of is all over the board. There's some guys that are really really high on them. Some outlets that think they're going to be able to surprise a lot of people, and there's others that really think that they're average to below average and might struggle quite a bit in year one under Mike McDonald as he kind of implements a scheme, and then they eventually get rid of Geno Smith. So it really depends on what side of the spectrum you're in. That's going to make you, believe that. For me, I think Seattle is going to be a pretty decent team. I think that they're going to be a team that shows a lot of um, really good things this year. They have a decent amount of talent. They got a lot of skill position weapons. I think they're going to be one of those teams similar to the Broncos, where they are going to find a way to be in every game, and then just a matter of how it happens at the end and how it ends up going. But I do think that they are a quarterback away from being a legitimate contender, because I don't know if Geno Smith is the answer. But Mike McDonald comes in. He was the defensive coordinator for the Ravens over the last couple of years. He's only 37 years old, and he's coming into Seattle, kind of taking over for Pete Carroll, who had a legacy, an amazing career in his decade plus there. And one thing that we know about Mike McDonald is the dude knows how to coach defense for damn sure. When they got rid of Wink Martindale there in um, in Baltimore, he came in. That defense was top of the league in most categories. They would take the football away. They were hard to run on. They were a tough group. So the guy obviously knows how to coach defense. How it's going to translate into Seattle, I don't know. But he's a young guy, and there seems to be a lot of really positive reports about him coming out of camp. I think the most important thing here is how do the Broncos prepare for what it is that he's doing? And Sean Payton talked about that today on his post game presser, or in the post practice presser. He had talked about, you kind of you look at some cut ups of the Ravens tape a little bit, to, what to understand, like schematically what they used to run at the Ravens, and some expectations, and then you look at some Seattle film from last year, and you look at the players and you see, okay, who's going to play what in what role, and how is that going to translate. And I think there's going to be a lot more in game adjustments. um, but this scares me because when you look at the Seattle roster, I think it's a very underrated roster. Actually, they got a lot of really, really good players across the board, offensively and defensively. Now, last year we were honestly ranked similarly on the defensive side and the offensive side, surprisingly, as Seattle. They weren't very good defensively. They struggled a lot against the pass specifically, but they really weren't that good at stopping the run either. And then on offense, they seem to not really be able to run the ball nearly as well as they wanted to, as they develop their young tackles. and Geno Smith was just inconsistent. So I think that's ultimately what led to the demise of Pete Carroll there. So very similar in terms of where they're at versus where we are. I think the biggest difference is obviously they have a quarterback that they're looking to replace, kind of a journeyman, and we have a really young, exciting rookie that we're pumped up about. But even with all that, it is on the road. It is in Seattle, one of the toughest stadiums to play in, one of the loudest stadiums, and we enter there right now, currently 6 point, 5.5 point underdogs, depending on where you look at it. And so that's really where that is. And what's kind of disrespectful is that they're it's the third largest spread of any of the games this week. So Vegas is not very optimistic about the Broncos this week at all, going on the road. But there's a lot of unknowns, and this is week one, week two is usually a tough week for the betting book. So we're not gonna worry about that all too much. But when we focus on some keys to the game, right? We break that down, keys to the game between, specifically for the Broncos. I think it's very simple. First and foremost, you need to weather the storm early. You cannot find yourself in a position where you're on the road, opening week, everybody's juiced, that crowd is banging, and then they got all the momentum because they go up and they go down the field and they score on you right away, or you're in a 7-0, 14-0, 10-0 hole right off the bat. The Broncos need to find a way to weather the storm, stay in this game, stay in control. The way that they do that defensively is by stopping the run, first and foremost. Because I think, what you got to think of, and you put yourself in the mind frame of the other um, coaching staff. Mike McDonald comes from a coaching tree where running the football and playing good defense is this bread and butter. He did that when he was in Michigan before Baltimore. He did that again in Baltimore. It was all about running the football and stopping. And they're looking at the Broncos defense and they're pointing out that their run defense is a weakness for the team. So the Broncos need to find a way to control the run game, put a stop to it, force Geno Smith to beat you, whatever it takes. Because Kenneth Walker can explode one, and he can really break your back when it comes to that. So that's the first major key of the game on the defensive side of it. Another one is going to be the turnover battle, right? Um, Specifically on defense. Listen, we might give the ball over. We got a young quarterback. We can't forget about that. But the Broncos defense needs to be opportunistic, like they were for that 5 or 6 game stretch in the middle of last year, and not just getting stops on third down. I mean, that's obviously going to be really big, but you could get turnovers on the road and set your offense up in a really good position. That's how you keep the crowd out of it, and that's how you keep the momentum on your side. So that's going to be really big. Offensively, obviously, it's gonna start with Bo Nix, and I think we're gonna say that every single week. But it's gonna be about making Bo Nix as comfortable as possible, making his reads possible, getting guys open, making the right calls, and just like stopping the run is important, I think establishing that run game is going to be huge. It's going to be imperative to be able to control the clock, control the momentum, control the flow of the game. It's going to be huge to ensure that we are successful, and it's going to open up a lot of things for Bo, because what this team is going to do is they're going to come in and they are going to dare the rookie quarterback to beat them with his arm. They can live with that if he can do it. And it's a tough challenge to ask of a rookie in his first game on the road. But in addition to that, they've got some dogs on defense as well. So getting that run game is going to be imperative. If you can't run the ball at 4 yards a clip, I don't see a situation in which we can win this game unless we're getting crazy. Whether it's a really lopsided turnover battle or some crazy explosive plays down the field. That's gonna be the thing. Now, when you look at the different matchups offensively and defensively, there's some players on the defensive side of the ball for Seattle that I really want to highlight that I think can cause a lot of issues, right? Um, and that we need to know. So one thing we know about Seattle, they've got a pretty stout defensive line, but they've got two really, really good cornerbacks on the outside, right? In Reek Woolen and Trey Brown, who's a kind of an up and coming player for them as well. But in addition to the Trey Brown kid, they got Devin Witherspoon, who was like the fifth pick, one of the early picks last year. They took him with the other Russ pick. They really owe us, by the way, for what we've given them. But Devin Witherspoon was a stud last year in his first year, and they put him a little bit more in the slot, but he can play everywhere. He's there to hit you. He reminds me a lot of Jaquan McMillan. And so he could be somebody that's a game wrecker as well. So they've got two really really good corners and another corner that I think is half decent in Trey Brown, who's a little bit underrated. But now in year 4 for him, he should be able to take that next leap for them. So they got some good players there. They got Rayshawn Jenkins in the as one of the safeties back there, along with Julian Love, both good, young, talented safeties. So their secondary as a whole is really solid. Their biggest weakness, in my opinion, is probably going to be their linebackers, or at least the inside linebackers in this team. Um, but not much to exploit really, and they got a really stout, like I said, a stout defensive line. And then obviously on offense, we already know Kenneth Walker's a really talented back. Him and Zach Charbonnet are a pretty good combination that can uh, bring different things to the table, but can really affect what you do defensively. It's gonna be tough. And then you look at their receivers; they arguably have one of the best receiver tandems in the NFL, and DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett. I'm expecting big things from Jackson Smith and Jigba this year. So we got our plate full. This is not going to be an easy game. It's going to be really, really tough, and I'm excited to watch it unfold. And I think some matchups that we really need to pay attention to that are going to be huge. A is obviously Bo Nix versus the Mike McDonald defense. Not so much about like how it's going to start off, but how is he going to be able to adjust in game? Is he going to be able to recognize disguises and different pressures and different types of blitzes that they're going to use? And is he going to be able to find the open man and get the ball out in rhythm, in time with the crowd noise? It's a lot. So that's going to be my first matchup of the key matchup of the game. A second one is going to be Riley Moss versus either Jackson Smith and Jigba or Tyler Lockett, depending on where they line them up. I'm expecting that it's probably going to be Riley Moss on Jackson Smith on Lockett and McMillan on um, Jackson Smith and Jigba. But the way Seattle does it is they'll mix those guys in between the slot all the time. So Riley Moss is going to get picked on a lot in this game. That's one thing I can assure you is they are going to test him and test him early, and they're going to do it often because they already know the other side of the field is locked down with PS2. And don't get it twisted. They're still going to throw to DK because DK is one of the elite receivers in the NFL. But they are going to test Riley Moss similar to how you saw them test Damari Mathis. Not them particularly, but you've seen teams test Damari Mathis, in his rookie season opposite of PS2. So Riley Moss is really going to have to show up for this game. Um, and it's going to be a big test, and both of those guys are really talented players, and it might be pretty tough. But that secondary as a whole might get tested because there's some turnover there on the back end with Brandon Jones coming in new and a lot of unknowns. So I'll be interested to see does Sean Payton roll out Riley Moss right off the bat, or does he go with a veteran guy and Levi Wallace that he feels like in this particular environment might be a little bit more ready for action. So that's going to be a really big key matchup for me. Another one is going to be Luke Wattenberg versus Jonathan Hankins. Jonathan Hankins is their nose tackle. He's going to be lined up over uh, Luke Wattenberg most of the time. And Luke Wattenberg, this is his first game he's ever started at center. I think he started a game before, I believe, guard. A lot of question marks about him. A lot of question marks about who would be the starter. But by all accounts, it seemed like Luke Wattenberg ran away with it after struggling a lot in his first couple seasons. So I'm really excited to see how is he going to fill in the shoes for Lloyd Cushenberry, and his position and his responsibilities are massive when you think about the success for a Bo Nix as well to be able to get in and out of the right checks. You know, they need to be on the same page. So that's going to be fascinating. But you can deal with some pressure coming on the edges. I mean, you've got two pretty solid tackles, but you can deal with some pressure given Bo's ability already to step up in the pocket and move a little. But if that pressure is coming up the middle over Luke Wattenberg, then you might get your rookie quarterback killed pretty early. So that's going to be a really key matchup for me is the way Luke Wattenberg plays. And then the fourth one that I have listed down here is Cortland Sutton versus Rick Woolen, right? Because their game plan defensively, in my opinion, is going to be stop the run and stop Cortland Sutton, even if you have to double team him. force somebody like Josh Reynolds, like Marvin Mims, like Devon Vele, like Greg Dulcich to beat you. But don't let Cortland Sutton beat you because he's the best playmaker in that wide receiver room. And Reek Woolen is a special player, man. He really is. He's a special corner. And so this might be a tough game for Sutton, but it's going to really test the depth of this receiver room, and it's going to force these young players to make plays in a timely fashion. And it's going to be huge for Josh Reynolds because Josh Reynolds might have his opportunities, and he's a vet, and he's had some success in this league. And so it might be a really big Josh Reynolds and Greg Dulcich type of a game, through the air. So overall, guys, I mean, the way that I look at it is if the Broncos want to go into Seattle and steal a win in the first week of the season, that they're really going to have to just be incredibly disciplined and just don't beat yourself. Don't let the crowd and the momentum play a big factor in this game. Limit that as much as possible. And in fact, flip that script on them a little bit. They got a young, inexperienced first time head coach in his first game, and force him to have to make those tough decisions and be put in those tough situations that can ultimately dictate the outcome of the game overall. And so that would be the biggest thing is just take care of the football. If every possession is ending with a kick, I think you're going to be in decent shape, and we'll be able to go from there. So tough game, guys. I'll get to my prediction here in a second, but another thing I want to look at is this is a fascinating game, a fascinating matchup, especially in week one for us because week one you're already not going to know too much about your opponent, right? Every year is a new year. Every roster had turnover. But when you have that happen, and in addition, you've got a team with an entirely new coaching staff and a coaching staff that's not really that experienced in the NFL either. Right? Their offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb came from Michigan, or sorry, from Washington, and this is his first ever coaching gig in the NFL, not just offensive coordinator. So, what kind of a play caller is he going to be? What kind of offense are they going to be running? So, there's a lot that you could be worried about, but there could be a lot that could be working in our favor. There's a lot of volatility there with these guys as well. So, it's going to be a fascinating matchup to watch, in my opinion, for sure. Oh, as much as I want to give the Broncos a win because it's so important that we start the season off strong, especially because after the Steelers game next week, we got a really really tough stretch. I mean, the first four games are really tough. If you can get through the first four games at 2-2, you're going to be solid. And getting a win in Seattle would be obviously an amazing start for that. But I ultimately think that the Broncos will fall short in this one by a score of 24-21. Um, I hope I'm wrong. I do because I just think that there's way too many things that are going to need to go in our favor for us to win, unless I'm completely just wrong about this team as a whole. But there's just so much unknown. There's unknowns on both sides. But I think that being on the road or Seattle being at home, is going to ultimately be the difference. And I got them winning by 3 points. So the good news is I'm usually the worst prediction giver ever. So hopefully I'm very wrong on this. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of where I got this going. But overall, guys, I want to know what you guys think. What are your keys to the game? What do you think is going to be the most important? What are the most important things that you feel like need to happen in order for us to start off the season 1-0? Historically, Sean Payton does have a good track record of starting the season well. Last year was definitely not that, but in general, he does. But what do we need to do to be able to get the dub in Seattle? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think and interact with you guys on that. Until then, guys, I'm so fired up. Let's go Broncos, baby. We are, 4 days away now? Something like that from the start of the season. So let's get this going, man. Let's get the 2024 season underway. Y'all have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Spend time with those people that you love the most. And until the next time, Broncos country,